The real season starts for Arizona football, and can the defense continue to keep teams in games like they showed against NAU?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. This show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Check it out. Go to 5hourenergy.com. Use code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. It is that simple, that easy. Check it out. All right, now we're going to talk some Arizona football this show, and we're going to talk about where Arizona is in the grand scheme of things, what this all means, and basically that none of this really matters if Arizona beats Kansas State, which is all true. Now, I think a big part of this is you got to look at defensively. We talked about it offensively. There was a lot to be desired in that game against NAU. A big part of it, though, was that the offensive line, you were dealing with a different signal caller in there before that had never done this. And I think that was that's something that it sounds easy. You're like, all right, well, you just put in a different offensive lineman and then you go to work. Well, in theory, that sounds great, but it was a first start and a lot of guys were just kind of going in the opposite directions. There were plays on the offensive line where you could watch offensive linemen and they were basically going in the opposite direction that Noah Fafita was going because they couldn't hear. It was a whole bunch of stuff. Josh Baker, you 1,000% have to really appreciate Josh Baker and everything that Josh Baker brings to the table. He is he's one of those players that you are not going to really properly appreciate him until he is gone. And that is and that's just kind of the way that it is with him. He is really kind of the force that keeps everything together. And obviously that's a really good thing. But he's going to be back. Arizona is going to be able to keep Arizona's going to be able to have all of their guys ready to rock and roll. And that's a good thing. One thing that was odd too, in hindsight, is that Arizona kept a lot of guys out that probably, I don't know that they would have been kept out. They sore calves, things like that. Generally, you just don't see that. You generally just don't see that one occur. But overall, this team should be almost fully healthy. Now, again, you're going to be missing Big Rhino. I get all that. Missing Big Rhino is obviously a miss, but overall, I think the team should be good. But let's talk about the defensive side, and let's talk about Dwayne Aquina and everything that Dwayne Aquina has talked about. He's been much happier with his defense against NAU. And granted, NAU does not have some of the talent that New Mexico does. It feels weird to say that, but they don't. There's no Ty Pennington is not Devin Dampier. He's just not. But Arizona gave up around 100 yards in the entire game. You didn't watch that game and say that NAU was really going to be able to do anything against them. And guess what? NAU didn't really do anything against them. So you got to give that tip of the cap. The defensive line was better than it was, and you were able to see players that were actually able to make some impactful plays. Jacob Manu looked back to being Jacob Manu, but there were a lot of guys that I think we were thinking about that could possibly help out. Kevon Darton hasn't really done anything this season, players like that, but it was much improved, and that's what you're going to need. I'm going to stick to this, and I fully believe this, that as long as I look at this roster, the defensive personnel is good enough to be a problem for other teams. Now, again, are they going to be the Desert Swarm? No, I'm not going to sit here and say that, but there is more than enough talent on this roster, and that's where I'm going to keep going back to. The defensive backs, very talented. Jacob Manu, probably the best linebacker in the Big 12, and if he's not, he's right there. The defensive line, also not bad. They shouldn't stink. Again, if they're like 5th or 6th in the Big 12, totally cool with it, but they shouldn't stink, and I think that's something that I think that that's where Arizona fans should have that expectation on, that they're going to be good enough to just not get pushed around, because they shouldn't get pushed around. And we're going to talk about what that means going against Kansas State here in just a little bit. One thing, too, we got to talk about, I get this all the time from people asking why Justin Flo doesn't play. I hate saying this because he's a really good kid. He's just not good enough. That's just the way it is. He's just not good enough. If he were good enough, he'd be out there. This is the fourth coaching staff that has not really deemed him good enough to play, from Mario Cristobal to Dan Lanning to Johnny Nansen to now Dwayne Aquina. And the problem is very simple. He just doesn't pick things up that other players do. When you watch him physically, he's a freak. He can go and, his quick twitch is fantastic. He's super strong. And again, he's a great kid, but he just doesn't understand some of the concepts. And, that's always going to be a little bit of the issue for him. So that's not really something that you can probably see going forward if you're the University of Arizona or if you're a fan. But again, a really, really good kid. I like that they tried to find a role for him on special teams. I know a lot of people are saying, well, what about fullback? No, because Caden Luke is your fullback, who we like on this show. But defensively, though, back to it, this is also going to be where Trey Smith, I think, needs to start, needs to really come alive. He had a sack this past game, and he was much more active. You're going to have to see that, though, in this game, and you're going to have to see that because that's going to be a big part of what Arizona wants to do. I mean, they love Trey Smith. He looked really good in camp. Now you got to be able to show it. And then I could say the same thing with Isaiah Johnson. Isaiah Johnson got a sack as well. The coaching staff loves him. He's probably not going to come off the field. Isaiah Johnson and Chuba Muai are bigger dudes, so you got to keep that in mind as well. And then, a tie. The defensive line is going to have to be able to hold its own against Kansas State. Kansas State is physical, but if you watched him, I don't know that you came away saying that, man, that's an unbeatable team. Defensively, they're obviously very, very good. We'll talk about that here in a second. But I was happy with what I saw from the defense and from Dwayne Aquina's bunch. I like Dwayne Aquina a great deal. I know that there are questions about him not being the DC before, all of that. I still think that the man knows football. I see his energy. I see his passion. I think how he breaks down film is next level, and that's something that a lot of different Dwayne Aquina's forgotten more football than most people. I still have a world of confidence in him as the defensive coordinator for this team. And I guess we will see if this one does play it out. But against Kansas State, you've got players that some players that Arizona is going to absolutely have to take advantage of or be wary of. But first things first, taking care of what you can take care of. Arizona had 16 missed tackles against New Mexico. I think that was down to 8 against NAU. You can't have 16 missed tackles, especially against good teams, because those missed tackles turn into touchdowns, because the guy obviously that was supposed to be there to make that play, he doesn't really count anymore, being that he missed that tackle, and then you put a lot of other guys in difficult positions. So that's obviously something that cannot happen again. All right, now we are going to preview those guys, but first, let's talk about Ultimate GM. Here's the great thing with Ultimate GM. With college football is here. We are now going into week 3 already. Wow. And everything is in high gear. Ultimate College Football HC has you covered. Download from the app stores or visit ultimate-cfb.com. 100% free boost. Use code LOCKEDONCFB in the game store. Again, it's another one of these where if you got college football here and you want to be part of it, it's a lot of really fun stuff. Ultimate College Football HC. Download from the app store or visit ultimate-cfb.com. Again, 100% free boost. It doesn't get any better than that. Use code LOCKEDONCFB in the game store. And again, you got a lot of really fun games coming up this week. Why not hop on right now? Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now, let's talk about Kansas State. Now, I think a lot of Arizona fans, well, not just Arizona fans, but I think college football fans in general kind of fall into the trap where they just watch their team and they just think that it's their team that's struggling. And you watch that game against Kansas State with Tulane, and the Kansas or the Tulane is beatable, or Kansas State is beatable. Because first, their offense, while good and why it can be dynamic, it is not overwhelming. And a big part of that is that we don't know for a fact what kind of passer Avery Johnson is. Now, love their running game. Obviously, Dylan Edwards, transfer from Colorado, made a right decision getting out of that cesspool in Boulder and getting to a good program. He's obviously very good. But Avery Johnson, through 3 games, I think we kind of know. And again, it's 3 games. He can definitely get better. But it seems that every single passing stat or game is 15 of 32 for $178, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. That's just not good. You know, that's not great. Arizona shouldn't give up a ton of passing yards against Kansas State. And if they do give up a ton of passing yards, then I think you have some bigger issues in play. Arizona's got a very good secondary. All of these players should be able to play. And, you know, obviously, Tacario Davis, he'll be fully able to go for this entire game. The secondary is going to need to ball out. The secondary is going to have to play very well because – a big part of, I think, Arizona's game plan is don't let Kansas State beat you on the ground. And the first thing is making sure that, you know, you don't have broken assignments, lost plays, etc. You're going to have a fully healthy team against Kansas State on the defensive side of the football. You got to be able to show it. Now, on the Kansas State also, has, like I said, has a very good running game. And I think that's where, if you're Arizona, you really got to be able to kind of focus in. You got to be able to focus in and hone in on what Kansas State does very well. And that is something. Avery Johnson obviously is very, very fast. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Arizona has a spy in this game. As a matter of fact, it would kind of surprise me if they didn't have a spy. A big part of what they want to do is run the ball, and Avery Johnson, if you lose contain, he'll be gone. He's a physical specimen. He is very fast. He's actually got some wiggle as well. He's just, like I said, he's just a very, very good football player, period. Arizona's got to be able to do a good job wrapping up against him and being able to contain him and the running game as well. You got multiple guys that can rush the ball or run the football. If Arizona is able to kind of obviously limit the passing game, which, you know, shouldn't be that difficult, and not let Kansas State just absolutely gash you on the ground, Arizona's going to have a real chance in this game. And that's that would be something where nobody would look back and really care at that point if Arizona struggled against NAU or New Mexico, if the Wildcats perform and we're able to beat Kansas State in Manhattan. Now, the next thing that I think we need to look at is what's the deal then with Arizona's offense? Because, listen, going into the season, we said this from day one, that Arizona is going to have to score a lot of points. And it's not necessarily an indictment on the defense. It's that you have a lot of very talented football players on the offensive side of the football. And we know about all those, but let's talk about the offensive line. You're going against a very good physical defense in Kansas State, where you got very good linebackers, you got good players off the edge. You got, I mean, again, they look the part on the defensive side of the football. Arizona, I think a big part of this, getting Josh Baker back is going to be huge for them because, again, that's the center that basically calls everything. He's the straw that stirs the proverbial drink, and he just kind of makes sure that everybody is in the same, everybody's on the same realm. Everybody is moving in the same universe. Now, having, I think, Big Jonah at left tackle will be big because he is, I think it was Yogi Roth that said, is there a better offensive lineman in the country? I don't think so. Having Big Jonah at left tackle is, I think that cures a lot of concerns. Over on that right side, you're probably not going to have Big Rhino back. I think the hope is that Big Rhino will be back for Utah. But so again, you're probably going to have Ryan Stewart at that other tackle. Matthew Lotto just not ready. And that's no slight towards him, but he wasn't brought in here to play immediately. So I think Arizona is going to just try to go with that more seasoned look, even if they might not have the upside. And then on the interior, you should be good, obviously, with You know, you got Leif back, you got Wendell Moore, you got Josh Baker, but this offensive line, there's going to be a lot of eyes on this offensive line, because I think a lot of people are wondering, is Kansas State going to be able to beat up this offensive line the way that it was, or is it going to make it be able to look bad the way that the offensive line looked against NAU? And again, it's one of those ones we are going to find out. But if the offensive line can perform well, then I think Arizona is going to be in pretty good shape, because, again, that was one of the tougher games that I've ever seen Noah Fifita play. But again, these weren't players that were on the same page, obviously, and that's something that I think you got to take into account. I also believe that Arizona is going to be able to run the ball. And when I say run the ball, I think that Arizona is going to be able to run the ball against basically every team they play. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, I'll put it to you like this. I don't think that he plays anymore at Arizona. I would love to be wrong. This is just a guess, but I think he's likely done. But you look at it, Quali Conley, Kedrick Risano, and then you look Fam and Rayshon Speedy Luke. I think you got more than enough. Quali Conley, too, has been the dude that you're like, all right, man, Arizona could have 30 Quali Conleys. He's a very good pass receiver. He also is a dude that can run the football as well, as we've seen. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Quali Conley goes for something like 1,200 yards this season. I think he's got that kind of potential to him. And in games like this, it's nice having that very solid running back, because if the offensive line creates space for him, creates holes, he's going to be able to find that. And that's a skill that the great running backs have. Again, he's not the fastest guy. He's not the biggest guy, but his instincts are next level. And that's, like I said, that's something that you definitely want to take advantage of. And then Kedrick Risano, watch how he came in. I mean, you can tell he's a year away from being an absolute monster. I mean, he is a big, big dude, and he's fast as well. That's probably your bell cow for next year, but now he's going to be one of those players. Clearly, Alonzo Carter has a lot of faith in him, and that's something that you can't really put a price tag on. So the running game, I don't really worry about it, and that's also a shout out to Alonzo Carter as well. He's a dude that who, as long as he's here, that running back room is going to be very, very talented. And he's shown that. I mean, you look at the players that you lost. You lost Michael Wiley, Jonah Coleman, and DJ Williams, and you quickly, in no time, replaced him with a Quali Conley. Obviously, JCM looks like he might be out, but Risano as well. Arizona's running game is going to be just fine. You got the talent back there. So much of that, though, is going to be on the offensive line and what they can do. And I think in this game as well, you could also see the tight ends staying in, or the running game staying in to try to help as well, to be able to give Noah some time, because you're going to need some time for Noah to be able to make the plays that he can make. Now, a lot of people are asking, what about T-Mac, his bad body language, all that. I think T-Mac was just frustrated. I don't think that was him pouting. I know a lot of people are asking, was he pouting? What was the deal with that? I don't think there was any pouting, to be honest with you. I think that he was just frustrated. And yes, Brent Brennan talked about it in his presser. He said, we talked about it. Even if you're not pouting or whatever, body language matters in these spots. And that's true. So I look for T-Mac again. I look for T-Mac to get right in this game, because he's one of those dudes, when you're the best wide receiver in college football, even if you're being double covered, even if you're being bracketed, whatever the case may be, T-Mac should still be able to get his. And the guy that I'm still all in on is Jeremiah Patterson. He had a really, really, really tough touchdown in that game. And not only that, he's shown on his kick returns that he's getting close to breaking them. He's going to break one this season. He's quick. He's shifty. I like him. I think that he's well on his way to kind of proving, I think, people right. It just might take a game or two. But the wide receivers, the other ones, though, there's some like Montana Lamonius Craig. I know that it sounds cool in theory, all of that, but he just hasn't been good. He's been at the U of A now for a year, a season and a half, well, not a season and a half quite, but he just doesn't get open. And that's the problem. He can't be playing he can't be playing easily the second most snaps, in my opinion. And I don't care about the whole thing about how, he's a good blocker or this and that. That's great. But a wide receiver's job at the end of the day is still to be able to catch the ball, or be able to get open and catch the ball. And Montana just doesn't have that burst. I mean, I think that we'd love to see it, because he certainly looks the part. but he just doesn't have that. And I don't think that he's ever going to have that. I would love to see them give Malachi Riley more of a look, more of a burn, because these dudes, like I said, I think you're just kind of wasting your time at this point with Montana Lamonius Craig. We will see though. But I think the offense, I look for the offense to rebound this week. I think that the offensive line is going to play much better. We will obviously see. Now, in a second, we're going to talk about what a win would mean and all of that. But first, 5-hour energy. All right, now with college football season here, you might be thinking, man, this is awesome, but it's hard for me to stay up for some of these games. Well, get in line. 5-hour energy says, come to us, 5hourenergy.com. Use code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. The great thing with 5-hour energy too, another one, it works. It's been around for a while, and people utilize it. So again, check it out, 5hourenergy.com. Use code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. What a great, great deal. And so, again, when I look at this, I'm thinking to myself, man, I want to be able to stay up for 14 hours and watch college football, but I get tired about hour 8. Pop some 5-hour energy. So again, go to 5hourenergy.com. Use code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. 5-hour energy. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. Okay, now, what would a win mean? And this is why I said that the game starts now. With Arizona, if you beat Kansas State, then nobody cares that you had a close win against NAU. Literally nobody cares. They don't care that it was 27-24 against New Mexico. And again, this is a game that is winnable for Arizona. It's tough that it's on the road, obviously, but this is still a game where Arizona's got a lot of talent. If you were to just look at the overall talent on the rosters, Arizona's talent, I think, matches up very favorably with Kansas State. But again, it's got to happen. If this is a close loss or Arizona quits itself, well, okay, I can deal with it. But the one thing that I can't have happen, I can't have Arizona get destroyed. There is no reason that a team with this talent should get destroyed. And if they do, I start to have immediate questions about what's going on behind the scenes, because there's way too much talent for that to occur. But go into this one with good vibes, knowing that, Arizona's got a lot of talent and they should be able to at least be able to be competitive in this game. And here's the thing. You beat Kansas State, you're probably going up to beat Kansas State on the road. You're probably going up to about 14 in the rankings. You got the longest winning streak in college football at that time. You get time off to be able to get healthy against Utah, and then it's game on against Utah as well. All of your goals are very much intact. Now, if you were to split Kansas State and Utah, you would 1,000% want that game to be, you'd 1,000% want to beat Utah, just because they're probably better, and they're also it's also a conference game at that point, which is obviously a big part of all of this. But again, Arizona can win this. Arizona can win this game. They've got the talent, but you need to see a good performance, because Arizona through 2 games has just not looked good against, now I think New Mexico is a little bit better, but Arizona just hasn't looked good. Everything gets real now, and that's where I think it's going to look. Now, tomorrow, we're going to talk about the running game, because again, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, that status obviously is very much up in the air, but you got a really good backfield there, and I think in Alonzo Carter, you have a running backs coach that knows how to be able to put players in the position to be able to succeed, and I think he will do that. So I don't really worry about that. We also might talk a little bit of Arizona basketball with the schedule release if we have time for it as well. But as always, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Bear down, back the A, and we will be back with you tomorrow.